3 people knew that the Alpha King of Vartal had married the wrong woman. One of them had drawn the contract. One of them had spoken the right that made it lawful. The third was standing in the freezing mud outside the west gate on the 2nd anniversary of the wedding, holding a lantern so that guests who would never look at her could find the step. It would be simpler if the fault were his. Dielva had tried that for 2 winters, and it had never once held, because you cannot blame a man for forgetting a thing that was taken out of him any more than you can blame a house for the fire. Which meant the fault belonged to whoever struck the light, which meant she would have to learn who, which was, she had discovered, a great deal harder than being angry and considerably less warming. So she held the lantern. She was good at holding things. Ilva of Thistlemere did not make scenes. Ask anyone in the tracking corps, and they would tell you exactly that, and then they would run out of things to tell you, because that was very nearly the whole of it. She did not drink at the winter feasts. She did not sing. She had the finest nose in the corps and the poorest conversation in the fortress, and she had built a life out of standing still in cold places and noticing what everybody else walked straight past. Carriages came up the west road from noon until full dark, and one by one the great houses of the Greenock lands went by her elbow, smelling of wet fur and warm wine. Then the horns went off along the wall, 3 long notes, and the crowd on the step turned as one, and the Alpha King came out of the hall, with his Luna on his arm. Ilva had learned not to look. She had learned it the way you learn to walk on a bad ankle, which is to say badly, and with a limp that never quite goes. She looked. Auric of Vartal was taller than his own portraits and worse dressed than any of them, and he wore the crown like a man carrying somebody else's coat. He was laughing at something the Thornwild envoy had said. It was a good laugh. It was not a true one, and Ilva could hear the difference from 30 paces, and she hated that she could. Beside him Celine stood in gray and silver, chin level, hand light on his sleeve. The Luna missed nothing. The whole fortress said so, usually while looking over one shoulder. Neither of them saw her. There was no reason on earth that either of them should. The king passed close enough that the wind brought her his scent, cedar and cold iron, and the faint sweetness of wine he had not wanted, and Ilva's whole body reported it to her like a bell struck in an empty room, and she stood absolutely still with a lantern in her hand and let it pass. Then the doors closed on the light, and the music and the corps went back to the shed. The shed was a long, low room, built against the kennel wall, and it smelled of tallow and hound and wet leather, and it was the closest thing to a home she had. Devra had the fire going. Fen had stolen a jug from the kitchen stair, and was very pleased about it. To the corps, Fen said, "Who guard the gate and eat the leavings." "Sit down," said Devra. 9 went up the north ridge, 7 came down. And tonight there are 40 kinds of pastry in that hall shaped like little swans. He drank. Swans. Bulda. Ilva pulled off her wet gloves and said nothing, which was what she always did, and which was why what happened next surprised everyone, including her. "It is not the pastry," she said. The room looked at her. She had not meant to keep going. The trouble was that she had been keeping it in for 11 months, since the ridge, and it turns out that a thing kept in that long does not come out in the size you packed it. We asked for 6 sets of storm lines. We were sent 2, and one of those had been spliced. We asked for the ridge posting to be moved a fortnight later because the thaw was early and the snow was rotten, and I put it in writing. The writing came back to us with the dates changed, and my name still under it. Her voice had gone flat, which was what it did, instead of rising. "We do not lose trackers to the weather, we lose them to the paper." "Ilva," Devra said quietly. "Every report goes up. Somebody upstream reads what we found and writes something tidier and sends the tidy one on, and by the time it reaches the top of the stair, it says the ridge was an accident and the corps was unlucky." She hung up her belt because her hands wanted a job. "It is not luck. Luck does not correct its spelling." Fen had stopped grinning. "You think he knows. I think he is the king," Ilva said. Not knowing is the one thing he has no right to be. Strongly put, said a voice from the doorway, for a woman who was not going to say anything. Every head in the shed came round. He was standing just inside the door, with the night behind him and no guard at all, and he had thrown a plain wool cloak over the good coat, and he had been there long enough that the snow on his shoulders had gone to water. Fen made a small strangled noise and went down on one knee so fast he knocked the jug over. Ilva did not move. Her body had gone somewhere ahead of her mind, the way it did on a cold trail, and it was telling her one clear useless fact, which was that he was 8 feet away and the wind was at his back. "Your Majesty," Devra said, and bowed, and put a hand on Fen's collar to keep him down. "The ridge," Auric said. He was not looking at any of them but her. "You put it in writing. Where does a thing like that go, when it goes up?" "To the Right Keeper's office, Majesty, then to the chamber, and you have a copy." "We are not permitted copies?" "No," he said. "I imagine not." He came 2 steps further in, and stopped, and something in his face changed, and it was not anger. And Ilva watched it happen, with the flat calm of somebody standing under a wave. He had caught her scent. "Say that again," he said. "Majesty? Anything. Say anything again." The shed had gone entirely silent. Devra's hand was still on Fen's collar. "We are not permitted copies," Ilva said. And the Alpha King of Vartal stood in a kennel shed, with melted snow on his shoulders, and stopped being a king. It went out of him all at once. His hand came up and pressed flat against his own chest as though he had been struck there, and his eyes went wide and wet and completely undefended. And for one whole breath, he was a man drowning in shallow water, with the shore in sight. 2 winters, Ilva thought. 2 winters, and it takes 8 feet and a wet wind. "What is your name?" he said. She had imagined this. She had imagined it in the dark on 100 watches, and in every version she had said her name, and the sky had come down. "Ilva," she said, and she watched it close over him. It was the worst thing she had ever seen, and she had seen 7 of 9 come down off a ridge. It closed the way water closes. The hand came off his chest, the breath went out, and came back in ordinary. The line settled between his brows, and the king came back up into his own face, like a man surfacing into a room he had not known he had left, and looked at her with polite, distant, perfectly kind attention. "Forgive me," Auric said. "I am not sleeping well. Which corps do you serve?" Something in Ilva's chest folded quietly in half. "Tracking. Majesty. Tracking." He turned the word over as though it were a coin found in an old coat. He was already reaching for the door. Then he stopped, with his hand on it, and stood a moment with his back to the whole silent shed. "Have we?" he said. The horns went off along the wall, 3 long notes, calling the king in to the reaffirming, and whatever the rest of that sentence was, it went out into the snow and the noise and was not said. Ilva woke on the shed bench with her boots on and the fire dead, and the immediate conviction that she had ruined her life. She had spent 26 years being careful, which is a way of never finding out how you behave afterward. Devra was at the table with a cup of something black and terrible. "How long have you been sitting there?" "Long enough to count." Devra pushed the cup across. "Drink that, you are gray." "What did I do?" "You told the Alpha King that not knowing was the one thing he had no right to be, in front of 6 witnesses, on the anniversary of his wedding." Ilva put her face in her hands. The night came back in the wrong order, as things do. The jug going over, Fen's knee hitting the floor, the snow gone to water on his shoulders. And arriving last and heaviest, the part she had managed not to look at directly, for 6 hours, which was his hand, coming up flat against his own chest. He had felt it. For one breath, in a kennel shed, he had felt it. And then he had asked her which corps she served. "There is more," Devra said. "Of course there is. After you went out to be sick behind the kennel." The king went back up the stair. Then a runner came down to the gate warden and asked for the name of the tracker in the shed. Ilva took her face out of her hands. "Which name did the warden give?" "Yours," It was the only one that fit. Devra turned the cup around on the table. There is no version where he does not get it. The warden is not brave enough to be useful. The core was stirring in the bunk room beyond the wall. Somewhere a hound complained about the hour. Ilva made herself think it through, in order the way she would work a cold trail, because panic and tracking use the same part of a person, and only one of them gets you anywhere. Speaking against the right keeper's office was not a hanging matter. It was a smaller thing than that, and therefore worse, because smaller things can be done quietly. She would be taken off the trail and put on the gate, or sent down to Thistlemere to count sheep in the house where she had been 11 years old and hungry, and the core would say it was a shame, and be careful for a month, and then forget there was no other trade for her. Halvard had come through Thistlemere in a bad winter and found a starving child who could tell him which of 4 roads a man had taken by kneeling in the mud, and he had put her in the core, and the core was the whole of what she was. Take it away and there was a woman with a good nose and nothing to point it at. They will put me on the gate, she said. Probably, Devra. Her throat was tight, and she was furious about it. The report on last night. My name will be on it. No, Devra said. It will not. Ilva looked up. Fen wrote it at 4 this morning with his tongue out like a schoolboy, and it says the king came to the shed and asked about the ridge posting, and the core answered his questions, and the core regrets the loss of a kitchen jug. Devra drank the last of the black terrible thing. It is signed by all 6 of us. Nobody put your name in it. Nobody had to be talked into that. Ilva sat very still. She had spent 11 years in that shed, doing the work and saying nothing and asking for nothing. And she had assumed, in the way you assume the floor, that this was because nobody there had a use for her beyond her nose. It had not occurred to her that she was covered, that she had been covered for years, quietly, by people who never mentioned it. Do not, Devra said, without looking at her. I was not going to. You were going to thank me, and then I would have to be pleasant. And it is not yet dawn. The shed door opened. Halvard came in on the cold stamping snow off his boots, and the rune changed shape around him, because he was the right keeper of Vardal, and because he was also in the specific way that had made Ilva who she was, the nearest thing to a father she had ever been issued. He was 60, and narrow and gray as a nail, and he had a way of coming into a room and finding the one person in it who was in trouble. Out, he said to Devra pleasantly. Devra went. Then he looked at Ilva, and Ilva, who had faced a wounded boar on a snow shelf without her heart changing speed, felt her stomach drop because Halvard was afraid. She had never seen it before, not once in 15 years. It sat very oddly on him. Listen to me carefully. Last night, in this room. Did the king touch you? What? Did he lay a hand on you? His hand on your arm, your shoulder, anywhere? Answer it. No. How close did he come? 8 feet. Perhaps less. She was watching his face, and getting nothing back, but the fear which he was now packing away with great efficiency. Halvard, what is this? Did he ask you anything? A beat? Did he ask your name? There is a moment on a cold trail when 3 unrelated marks stop being 3 marks and become one animal, and you cannot unsee it afterward, and you have to keep your face still, because it is often still nearby. He asked which core I served, Ilva said. Halvard looked at her for 4 long seconds. Good, he said. Good, then it is nothing. He turned and pulled his gloves back on, and the fear was gone from him entirely, which was somehow far worse than watching it arrive. You will not speak of last night. Not to the core, not to the chamber, not if the king himself asks you a second time. You will say the core answered his questions and nothing else occurred. Do you understand me? No, Ilva said. You understand me perfectly. He said it gently. He had always been gentle. I pulled you out of a ditch, girl. Let me keep you out of one. He was reaching for the latch when somebody knocked on the other side of it. The man in the doorway wore the household gray and carried a folded paper with a seal on it that Ilva had never in her life seen up close, and he did not look at Halvard at all, which in that fortress was very nearly a crime. Ylva, of Thistlemere, of the tracking corps, that is me. You are summoned within the hour. He held out the paper. Not by the king. Halvard's hand was still on the latch. By the Luna, the man said. The Luna's receiving room was small, which surprised her, and warm, which surprised her more, and it had one narrow window, looking east over the kennel roofs, which meant that Solene of Vardal had been able to see the tracking shed every morning for 2 years. Ylva stood on the good rug with her hair wet from the trough and understood, with the clarity of a woman who has run out of room, that she was about to be dismissed by somebody with beautiful manners. You are taller than I expected, Selene said. Majesty, sit. You are dripping on my floor either way, and I would rather you did it comfortably. The Luna set aside a stack of papers, and Ylva revised several opinions at once. Up close, Selene was younger than the fortress said, and considerably more tired, with the eyes of somebody who had spent 2 years reading things nobody meant her to read. The ridge posting. 9 up and 7 down. Was it the storm lines, or was it the dates? Ylva had prepared for a great many openings, and not that one. Both, Majesty. The dates were the killing part. Yes, Solene tapped one finger twice on the papers. The king came back from the west stair at midnight, and would not go to bed, and would not say why, and at 2 in the morning he sent for 11 months of tracking reports, and read them until the candles went. He has not been well since. I would like to know what happened in that shed. And there it was, laid on the good rug between them. Ylva thought of Halvard pulling his gloves on. Not if the king himself asks you a second time. The corps answered his questions. Majesty. Nothing else occurred. Selene did not move for a moment. Then she smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile, and it was not aimed at Ylva. Somebody has been at you already, she said. That was quick, even for this place. She rose and went to the narrow window and stood with her back to the room. I am going to tell you what I want, and then you may lie to me for the rest of your life if you find it easier. Majesty, there have been 3 accidents in 14 months. A girth strap on the reaffirming Hunt, a stone off the south scaffold that came down through the awning where he takes his midday, and a bridge rope on the Sable, cut halfway through and left to fray, which the chamber has recorded as rot. Her voice did not change at all. The chamber records everything as rot. I am the Luna of the Grenic lands, and I cannot get one honest sentence written down in my own house. Ylva's hands had gone cold. You are the best nose in the corps. Everybody says so, and everybody says it as though it were a fact about a hound. Selene turned round. I am claiming, you, claiming, as my own. Sworn to the Luna's household, quartered above the east arch, answerable to me. She picked up her pen as though the matter were settled, which, Ylva understood with a lurch, it was. Keep your bunk in the shed if it comforts you. But your name goes in my book this morning, and comes out of the right keeper's. There was no refusing it. A Luna's claim was not a post one applied for. To decline it in front of the household clerk was an insult that would follow her down the years, and to accept it was to spend every remaining day inside 8 feet of the man who had forgotten her, at the shoulder of the woman who had not. Why me? Ylva said. Because, in 11 months of reports, you were the only person who wrote down what she actually found. Solene signed something. And because you were in that shed last night, and whatever you saw there you have been ordered to forget, and I have discovered that I like the company of people who are being ordered about. We have a great deal in common. The door opened without a knock, which in the whole fortress only one person could do. Ylva got to her feet. Auric came in with a sheaf of papers under his arm and his sleeves already pushed back, and by daylight in his own house, sober and crowned and entirely himself, he was a different creature from the man who had stood in the shed with snow melting on his shoulders. The room bent toward him. Her own wolf came up under her skin and stood to attention without being asked. Last night she had told him he had no right not to know. In this room, in this light, She understood that she had done something extremely stupid. "Ah," he said. "The tracker." He did not know her. She had been braced for the recognition to be there and hidden. She had not been braced for the plain absence of it, delivered kindly, in front of a third party, while he shifted the papers to shake her hand, like a man being introduced at a fair. "Ilva, Majesty!" He said it the way you say a word in a foreign tongue, carefully and without meaning. Nothing at all happened in his face. "I read your reports, all of them, I am afraid, which is why I look like this." The ridge was not weather. "No, Majesty, no." He dropped into the chair beside his wife's desk without any ceremony whatsoever, and rubbed both hands over his face. "The dates on your ridge posting were altered after your signature. Do you know what the chamber says when I put that in front of them? They say the core is emotional. They have been saying it for 2 winters in slightly different words, and I have been letting them, because it was easier than reading 11 months of anything." Ilva said nothing. She had come here prepared to apologize. It had been sitting ready in her mouth since the horns went off, and now there was nowhere to put it down. "I want to see the North Ridge," he said. "Majesty, you said I have no right not to know." He looked up, and for 1 second there was something under the tiredness that had teeth in it. Then, "Show me. Take me up, and show me where you lost them. And we will find out whether it is as simple as I have been assuming." "The king," said Celine, without looking up from her pen, "does not go up a rotten ridge in a thaw." "The king," said Auric, "has been kept off every rotten thing in this country for 2 winters, and look at the state of it." They did not raise their voices. Dilva stood on the rug and watched them handle each other with the practiced, careful, faintly sad economy of 2 people who were not in love and had made a working peace out of it, and something in her that she had no right to feel at all loosened by half a turn. Then a clerk wanted the book signed, and Celine sent word to the right-keeper's office that a name was moving, and Ilva heard her own name said aloud by a Luna in a warm room and did not know where to look. And then the room emptied the way rooms do, all at once and by accident, and it was the 2 of them. Auric stood at the window with his back to her and did not turn around. "May I ask you something? Not as your king?" Her hand was on the door. "Majesty, when you spoke last night, in the shed, I had a sensation of having heard it before, not the words. The voice." His voice had changed. Everything easy had gone out of it. "I have had it since, all night. The way you have a name on your tongue, and cannot get it into your mouth." He turned round then, and he was not performing anything, and it was so much worse. "It is a foolish question, and I have no business putting it to a woman I have met once. Have we met before?" The whole of her life stood up in her chest and asked to be let out. She thought of Halvard's face going white, and 3 accidents recorded as rot, and the envoy from the Thornwild laughing in the hall, and a treaty 2 winters old that had bought peace for 100,000 people, and 9 going up the ridge and 7 coming down. "No, Majesty," Ilva said. "We have not. They went up the North Ridge 4 days later, in weather that nobody would have called good, and Ilva would not have called safe." She had expected an argument about the escort. There was none. Auric came down to the yard before dawn in a tracker's coat with no braid on it, and 2 of the Luna's household behind him. And when Ilva said that 4 was too many for quiet work, he sent one of them back inside without a word. He could ride too, properly without fuss. The way you ride, if you were put on a horse before you could reason with one. Somewhere in 2 winters of watching him laugh at envoys, she had let herself forget that the man had been an alpha's son before he was anybody's king. They came up out of the tree line at the middle of the morning, and the ridge opened in front of them, white and gray and going on for miles. And Ilva got down and knelt in the snow, because that was where the work was. "Talk me through it," Auric said. "You will be cold. I am already cold. Talk me through it." So she did. She showed him how a slope tells you its history if you cut down through it, the ice lens under the fresh fall, the sugar snow beneath with no strength in it at all, the whole thing sitting on the mountain like a plate balanced on a spoon. She showed him how scent sinks and pools in cold air so that a trail a year dead can still be read out of a hollow where nothing has washed it away. He asked questions. The questions of a man who intended to remember the answers, and twice he stopped her and made her say a thing again more slowly. Where? He said finally. She took him along the shelf to the place. There was nothing there to look at. That was the worst of it. Always. Two of hers had gone off this shelf, and the mountain had not troubled to keep a mark of it. Bard, she said. 22. And Alric, who had a wife in the lower town, and a bad knee, he never reported because he thought I would take him off the trail. Her voice did the flat thing. I would have? Auric stood beside her and looked at the nothing for a long moment. Say their names again. She did. He repeated them once, quietly, and Ilva discovered that she had to look away down the valley for a while. The lines, he said, when she had her face back. You said one was spliced. It is still up here. We could not carry everything down. It took her half an hour to find the anchor, and when she cleared it, she stopped talking altogether. What? Said Auric. The line did not part. She had the frozen coil out of the snow, and she turned it in her hands so he could see. Here, that is a splice, and it is a good one, and it held. The line is whole. She set it down and pushed the snow away from the rock. The pin came out. He crouched next to her. The wind had swung round in the last hour and was carrying nothing of him to her at all, and Ilva was so grateful for that small mercy that she nearly laughed. A pin is driven into sound rock and bent over, so that a pull along the line tightens it. It cannot walk out. Not in a night, not in a season. She showed him the hole. It was straightened. First. Somebody knelt here in the dark with a hammer and took the bend out of it, and then it was a nail in a wall with two men hanging off it. Auric did not say anything. They went at the change of the watch, when the second line was down for the transfer. Anyone who has read a corps posting knows the hour. She sat back. And a pulled pin in a thaw looks exactly like rotten snow to anybody who wants it to. Which is why the report says, weather. He got up and walked 6 paces, and stood with his back to her, and Ilva watched the shape of his shoulders and understood that he was working very hard at something. I signed the summary, he said. The tidy one. In the spring I signed it with a cup of tea in my other hand, and I did not read past the first page, and one of those names was on the second. He turned round. You may say something now. I would take it kindly, if it were rude. Ilva considered him. You have been king for 4 winters, and you have signed everything they put under your hand, she said. You are not a bad man, Majesty. You are a very well managed one. There was a pause of about 3 heartbeats. Then Auric of Vardal laughed, not the good false one from the step at the reaffirming. A short, startled, undignified noise that got away from him before he could put a crown on it, and it went across the ridge and came back off the far wall, and Ilva felt the corner of her own mouth go before she could stop it. Well managed, he said. Yes, that is the word for it. He came back and stood over the anchor, and looked down at it, and the laugh went out of him, and something harder came in. From today, anything you sign comes to me, he said. Not to the chamber, not to the right keeper's office. To my hand, sealed, and I will open it myself, Majesty. I am a tracker of no rank. You are the only person in my house who has shown me a fact this year, and pressed. He was already writing it, standing up, in a little book with a stub of pencil, and he tore the page out and gave it to her, and it was the untidiest writ in the history of the Greenock lands, and it had his name at the bottom. If anybody obstructs you, they may explain themselves to me in person, and I will be extremely pleasant about it. Why did you stay? Auric said. Majesty. 11 years in a kennel shed, no rank, no copies of your own reports. Anybody with your nose could have gone to the trade houses and been rich. Why stay? And Ilva, who had spent 2 winters keeping her mouth shut with great professional skill, heard herself begin to answer it honestly. "Because there is nothing else I am," she said. "I am not clever with people. I am not much to look at. I am not warm. I do not." She stopped. She had come very close to laying the whole list out on the snow in front of him, the way you empty a pack to prove there is nothing in it worth stealing, and she caught herself with one item left in her hand. Arik was looking at her with an expression she could not read at all. "Someone told you that," he said. "That list. You did not make it yourself. You're only reciting it." The wind swung. It came round off the high slope above them, down and over and into her face, and it brought the mountain with it, wet rock and old snow and Hound and the two men beside them, and underneath all of that, thin and sweet and entirely impossible resin smoke. Ylva went absolutely still. She knew that scent. She had breathed it every 7th day of her life, since she was 11 years old, in a stone room with a low ceiling, and it did not belong on a mountain. And it did not belong in this wind, and this wind was coming down off the slope above them. Which meant it was fresh, which meant somebody was up there. "Get down," Ylva said. "What?" She did not ask twice. She took the Alpha King of Vardal by the collar and put him into the snow behind the anchor rock, and she was still going down on top of him when the mountain let go. It did not sound like anything. That was the part nobody believed afterward. A soft, heavy cough somewhere above, then a long hiss like a held breath, and the shelf they had been standing on 20 feet to the left went out from under itself and took the shape of the world with it. Snow came over the rock in a wave and filled her mouth and both ears. Somebody's boot hit her ribs. Then it stopped, and the quiet afterward was worse. Ylva got her head up and spat. "Majesty." "Here." He was under her elbow, white to the eyebrows, alive. The others, she was already looking. One of the Luna's men was on his knees 40 feet down the slope, coughing. The other one was not anywhere. "Stay behind the rock." She got her knife out. "Do not argue with me, and do not stand up." "Ylva, that was a cornice fall. That was a cornice cut," she said. "Twice on either side of the middle, and a cut cornice comes down the length of the cut, and not one step further, and look where it stopped." She pointed with the knife at the clean edge of it, straight as a rule. "That was not weather. Now be quiet, because they will come down and make sure." They came down, 2 of them, off the high slope, wrapped to the eyes, and moving with the flat economy of men who have done this indoors and out. Ylva let the first one get closer than he liked, because the snow was deep, and he was watching the rock and not the hollow beside it. And when he came past her, she took his legs and put the knife arm into the ice and knelt on it until it stopped being an arm that could hold anything. The second one did not go for her. He went straight past her for the rock. She was slower than she wanted to be. He had a hand on the anchor and his knife up when she hit him from behind, and the blade came round and opened her along the outside of the forearm from wrist to elbow, and she did not feel it at all, which was information she filed for later. She got his wrist and turned it the way you turn a wet branch, and something in it came apart, and he went down in the snow making a high, thin noise. A whistle came off the slope above, one short note. The one with the ruined wrist got up and went. He did not run. He walked, backward and level, with his eyes on her, until the slope took him, and the other one went with him at the same pace. And nobody panicked, and nobody dropped anything. Silence came back down over the ridge like a lid. Ylva stayed in her crouch with the knife up and her arm beginning, distantly, to report in. The other of the Luna's men was still not anywhere, and was not going to be. Behind her, Arik got up out of the snow and brushed his sleeves off. "Well," he said, "that answers the question of whether the pin came out by itself." Ylva turned round and looked at him. He was standing on a shelf, with a dead man under the snow, 20 feet away, and half a mountain gone. And he was tidying his cuffs, and his hands were entirely steady, and there was nothing in his face at all except a kind of grim, mild interest, as though a difficult letter had finally arrived. "You are not frightened," she said. "I am extremely cold. You were nearly killed." Yes, he looked up. You are bleeding a great deal. Give me your arm. How many? Ilva said. He stopped. How many times, Majesty? And do not tell me one, because I have been in the Luna's book 4 days, and I can already count 3 that the chamber wrote down as rot. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Auric came across the snow and took her left hand and turned the arm over, quite gently, and began winding his own scarf around it, and he did not look up while he did it. 4, he said. This is 4, and you have told nobody. I have told the whole world. I have said it out loud in the chamber twice. He pulled the scarf tight, and she hissed. There's a word for a king who says that his own house is trying to kill him and cannot prove it. And the word is not king for very long. Also, there is a thorn-wild envoy in my east wing, who is looking for one crack in this treaty. And if he finds it, 40,000 people go back to burying their sons. So I say it out loud and I let them write rot, because rot is cheaper than a war. You should be afraid. Yes, Auric said. I have thought that too. He finished the knot and let go of her arm, and did not step back, and up close. With the wind gone, she could smell the whole of him again. Cedar and cold iron, and now snow and blood, and it went into her like a nail. You will think this is self-pity, he said. It is not. It is a symptom. He said it to the middle distance, quite calmly, the way you report a fact from a page. Somewhere in the first night of my marriage, I lost something. I do not know what it was. I have never known. There is a room in me, with the furniture taken out of it, and I have spent 2 winters walking through it and telling my counselors that the house is fine. Ilva could not breathe. So when a strap goes, or a stone comes down, or a mountain, Auric said, I notice that I am not frightened, not brave, not frightened, and I have begun to wonder whether a man can be killed twice, and whether the first one already happened, and nobody thought to tell me. He turned and started down the slope toward the Luna's man, who was still on his knees. Do not put that in your report, he said over his shoulder. Put the pin in it. Put the cornice in it. Leave me out. She put the pin in it. She put the cornice in it. She left him out, and she hated herself, and she sent it up sealed to his hand, and a fortnight later a man from the chamber came down to the shed to ask her in a bored voice whether she had considered that a cornice can crack along a straight edge naturally. That was the shape of the next 5 weeks. Ilva learned the fortress the way she had learned the North Ridge, which is to say, slowly, on her knees from underneath. Soline's household ran on paper, and the right-keepers ran on rights, and the chamber existed to make sure the two never met. She learned which clerks would talk. She stood at the Luna's shoulder in the long gallery twice a week and read the room while Celine read the men in it. And she learned Auric, which was the part she had promised herself she would not do. He was around, that was the trouble. He came to the kennel yard at dawn, because the hounds did not want anything from him. He learned Fenn's name, and Devra's, and the name of a hound with one ear, and he used them. He sent down the whole year of reports with his own hand in the margins, going backward through them one night at a time, like a man digging out a cellar. And the notes were not kingly at all. This does not follow from the page before it. Who is Alric's widow and has she been paid? He deflected everything. Every time she came at the thing sideways, every time she said the words 2 winters ago in any arrangement at all, he heard the shape of the question coming and he was somewhere else by the time it arrived. He would ask her about the hounds. He would ask her opinion of the chamber, which was a joke between them by the 4th week. Once, when she pushed harder than she should have, he said quite pleasantly that he was not going to discuss his marriage with a member of his wife's household, and she went away and lay on her bunk in the dark and shook with fury for an hour because he was right. She wanted him. There was no dressing it up by the 5th week. It arrived in pieces and none of them were dignified. It was his hand flat on a map, tendons and old scars, while she talked about drainage. It was the 7th evening of rain when he came in under the arch with his hair stuck to his forehead and laughed at the state of himself. and she had to go and look at a wall. It was the way he said her name now, which was not carefully anymore, which was as though it had always been in his mouth. She had lived 26 years with the plain understanding that wanting was a thing other women did and got, and she had built a whole life on the far side of that understanding. And now she lay awake over the east arch with her ruined arm aching and her body making entirely specific suggestions in the dark, and she despised every minute of it. And she did not stop. On the 9th of the frost month, the Thornwild envoy asked for the floor. Saren was a small, neat woman, with a soft voice and no discernible temper, which Ilva had learned to be frightened of, and she stood in the long gallery with her hands folded and destroyed the winter in under 100 words. My packs have kept this treaty 2 years on the strength of a union, Saren said. In that time, there has been no heir. There have also been, if my counting is generous, 4 occasions on which the Alpha King came near to dying, and I am told each time that the Greenock lands have a problem with rot. She let that sit. So my elders instruct me to ask for the renewal, the full right, at midwinter, spoken before witnesses of both sides. Ilva did not know what that meant. Selene did. Ilva watched the Luna's hand close very slowly on the arm of her chair. The renewal is a formality of the old law, Siren said, to nobody in particular. The right keeper stands up in front of everybody and attests that the union is sound, and that neither party stands under a prior claim, and that no right has been worked on either of them to make it so. He attests it on his own name and his own life. She smiled. If Varthal has nothing to hide, it costs you an afternoon and some candles. Nobody spoke. At the far end of the gallery, Halvard the right keeper stood in his grey, with his hands inside his sleeves, and looked at the floor, and Ilva watched him do it, and felt the whole ridge come down on her a second time. 6 weeks midwinter. 6 weeks, and Halvard would have to stand up in front of the Thornwild and swear on his own life that no right had been worked. And Ilva did not know what the right was called or what it was for, but she knew what a man looks like when he is standing in front of a hole he dug himself. She got out of the gallery. She got up the east stair and into her own room and shut the door and put her back against it. Tell him. Tell him tonight, and in 6 weeks he goes into the renewal knowing, and it is over. And the treaty is over with it. And Saren rides home, and 40,000 people go back to burying their sons. And it will have been because a tracker wanted somebody? Do not tell him. And he walks into midwinter with the furniture out of the room, and swears a thing that is not true, and it holds, and the peace holds, and she stands in the second row and watches him do it. She was still standing against the door, with her hands over her face, when somebody knocked on the other side of it. She knew before she opened it. She could smell her. Selene came in without being invited, and looked at the bare little room, the cot, the belt on its nail, the folded coat, the single window. Sit down, the Luna said. Majesty, sit down, Ilva. She stood on the bare boards with her hands quite still in front of her, and her face was not unkind, and it was not kind either, and she looked at last as tired as she was. I am going to ask you a question, she said, and I would like the truth, because I have had 2 years of the other thing, and I find it does not keep. Ilva sat down. What are you to my husband? Said Selene. I am his mate, Ilva said. She had not known she was going to say it. It went out of her into the little room and could not be got back, and the strange thing, the thing she would think about for the rest of her life, was that Selene of Vardal did not look surprised. The Luna sat down on the end of the cot. She did it heavily, like somebody who has been standing for 2 years. Say the rest, she said. So Ilva said the rest. 3 winters ago, a hunting party out of Vardhall, in the wet month, a young Alpha King 2 seasons, on the throne, who had got separated from his own men, and asked a tracker on the Thistlemere road, which of 4 ways went south. She had given him the wrong one. She had watched him ride off down it and then gone after him an hour later out of guilt, and found him laughing in a ford with a lame horse, and they had walked back together in the dark. and it had struck them both somewhere between the ford and the village, and neither of them had said a word about it for a fortnight, because it was too large to put a hand on. She said it flatly and in order. The way she made a report. It was the only way it would come out at all. 11 weeks, she said. Then the Thornwolds sent their terms, and he went back to the fortress, and the next thing I heard, he was married. And when I saw him at the wedding, he looked straight through me, not coldly. He has never once been cold. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger holding a lantern. Celine was very still. And you said nothing. For 2 years. Who would I say it to? Me, said Celine. Ilva looked at her hands. On the night I was married, Celine said, I was 19, and Halvard the Right-Keeper came to my rooms with a clerk and 2 candles and a paper, and he told me that the old law required the incoming Luna to attest that no prior claims stood on either party. He said it was a formality. He said the word formality 4 times, and I counted, because even at 19, I counted. Her voice was perfectly level, and her hands were not. I signed it. And then, I went out into that hall, and I watched my husband smile at 300 people, and about a month later I began to understand that I was married to a man in mourning, who did not know he had lost anything. Majesty, do not. Celine shut her eyes briefly. I have had 2 years of being the woman in the way. I am not going to be her tonight as well. Auric and I have never been anything but a treaty, Ilva. We were kind to each other about it, which is more than most, and I have 300 witnesses to a right I did not know I was helping to seal. She stood up. I have a signature on a lie, so does your right-keeper. Mine I will answer for at midwinter, in front of Saren and the whole Thornwild, if you will stand up with me. Ilva could not speak. That is 6 weeks off, said Celine at the door. You have kept your mouth shut for 2 years, and I do not know how you have borne it. Go and see him. Majesty, he is your husband. He is my colleague, Celine said. And he is dying by inches, and you are the only person in this fortress who has ever made him ask a question twice. The east arch stair was cold. Ilva went up it anyway. He opened the door himself in his shirt sleeves, with a pen still in his hand and his hair on end, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. There is a thing I cannot tell you, Ilva said. All right, I mean it. There is a thing I cannot tell you, and I am not going to, and you should send me away, because I am standing here about to ask you for something, and I am not being honest with you while I do it. Auric looked at her for a long time. Do you know what I have? He said. Instead of the thing you cannot tell me, I have a room with no furniture in it, and for 6 weeks the only hour I have not been able to hear the echo in that room is the hour I spend with you. That is what I have. It is not much, and I would like to keep it. That is not a reason. No, he agreed. It is a want. I have not had one of those in 2 winters, and I find I have no practice at all. He set the pen down. And Ilva, who had been wanted for her nose and her hands and her silence, and never once for herself, stood in a doorway and understood that the man in front of her had nothing whatsoever to gain from her. He did not know she was his. He had no ledger she could serve. There was no advantage in this room. She reached up and put her hand against the side of his face. She felt him go still under her palm. She heard the breath go out of him. And then his hand came up over hers and held it there hard, the way a man holds a rail, and she stepped in over the threshold and pushed the door shut behind her with her heel. The rehearsal for the renewal was held in the Right Hall 9 days before midwinter, and Ilva stood at the back of it in the luna's grey and watched the resin burn. She had never once questioned it. That was the thing she would have to live with. Every 7th day of her life since she was a child in a stone room with a low ceiling, and it had simply been the smell of Halvard's office, the way tallow was the smell of the shed. Nobody asks what the air is made of. 2 braziers, one at either hand of the right-keeper's place. Sweet grey smoke, going up into the vault. Auric stood in the middle of the floor and let a clerk arrange him. He had not slept. She could see it from 30 feet, the grey under his eyes, the way he had stopped bothering with the good false smile in front of the household, because she was in the room, and it seemed pointless. Twice in the last week she had woken beside him, and found him awake, and looking at the ceiling with an expression that made her want to break something. When the clerks broke off to argue about the order of the witnesses, he came over to her and did not touch her, and stood at her shoulder, facing the other way, like any other officer of the household. "In 9 days," he said quietly, "I am going to stand there and be asked whether this union is sound, and I am going to say yes, in front of 200 people, and I want you to know that I have understood for some time that I will be lying. Majesty. I do not know what the lie is. That is what I cannot get past." He was watching the smoke. "That is the part that takes the sleep. Not that I am a liar, that I am a liar and cannot be told what about." She should have said nothing. She had a promise to Hallvard, and a treaty, and 40,000 people, and 5 weeks of a life she had never expected to be allowed. "Look at me," she said. He turned. She put 2 fingers against his wrist, where the sleeve ended. It went through her like the ridge coming down. Not desire. She knew desire now, and this was not that. It was a door blown in. It was grief, arriving in her chest from outside her, an enormous patient grief with the shape of a room in it, and under that a low steady terror he had been carrying. So long he had stopped calling it anything, and under all of it, faint and thin and 2 winters buried, something turning over in the dark and beginning to wake. She felt him feel her. Rx's whole face came apart. His hand closed on hers hard enough to hurt, and he said, "Ylva." And it was not the way he had said her name for 6 weeks. It was the way he had said it in a ford 3 winters ago, with a lame horse and his boots full of water. "There you are," he said. Somebody dropped a book at the far end of the hall. 200 years of habit came down on her. Halvard was 30 feet away in the smoke, watching the clerks. "It is the resin," Ylva said, and pulled her hand back. "The smoke in here is very heavy. It is nothing." Arik did not move at all. "Nothing," he repeated. "You are exhausted, Majesty. So am I." "Yes," he said, after a moment. "Of course." And the mask came up over him, kindly and completely, and it was the second worst thing she had ever seen, and she had made this one herself. He went back out onto the floor, and Ylva stood there, hating herself, in a burning room, which is why she noticed the smoke was wrong. She knew what that resin smelled like, at the end of a rite, thinning out and going bitter at the edge as the last of it burned. This was not thinning. It was building, and it had a second thing under it now, oily and faintly green. That had not been in the stone room when she was 11, and had not been in it last month either. She was moving before she had finished thinking. Somebody said her name. She went up the 2 steps to the right keeper's place, and put her boot into the nearer brazier, and sent the whole thing over, onto the flags, coals and all, and turned and got the other one with her shoulder. "Get him out," she said. "Get the king out of this hall." Nobody moved, because she was a tracker in a borrowed coat. "Now," said Celine of Varthal, from the gallery, "they got him out." He made it as far as the corridor before his legs went, and Ylva got under his arm and took him down to the floor with her, instead of onto it, and for 11 seconds his heart did something under her hand that she never afterward described to anybody. Then it steadied. Then he was telling her, weakly and with a great deal of feeling, exactly what he thought of her boot and her timing, which she took as an excellent sign. She sat on the stones, in the smoke, with the Alpha King's head against her shoulder, and worked it out, in the cold, flat part of her mind, in order. The resin was not incense, it was maintenance. Every 7th day, all her life, in a stone room, and every 7th day in this hall for 2 winters, and somebody had spent 6 weeks watching that maintenance start to fail and had decided 9 days before midwinter to stop maintaining and start finishing. Which meant the renewal was the reason, which meant she was the reason. "Do not write it," Arik said. When he could talk, he had her wrist. "Ylva, 9 days. Saren is in the East Wing. If it goes in a report now, the whole treaty. Promise me. I promise, Ilva said. And she was already deciding to break it, and she thinks now that he knew, because he shut his eyes and let go of her wrist. She waited until the third bell. Then she went down to the right hall stores with no lamp because a tracker does not need one, and she found the resin in tallow cloth on the second shelf. And she found the account book beside it, and she was still on her knees with the book open in the dark when a light came up behind her. "You should not be in here, girl," said Halvard. He did not shout. In 15 years, she had never heard him raise his voice, and he did not raise it now. He came in and set the lamp down on the shelf above her head, so that the light fell on the open book in her hands and not on his face, and he waited while she read. She read the entries, going back 27 months of them, in his own small, careful hand, the quantities and the dates and the initial of the person the smoke was for. "You have found the ledger," Halvard said. "Good. I would rather you had it from the paper than from me. You have never believed anything, you were only told. You made him forget me." Yes. He said it the way he had said everything to her for 15 years, patiently, without hurry, the voice that had taught her how to read 4 roads in the mud. "The right is called the quiet," he said. "You will not have heard the name, because there are perhaps 6 of us living who can speak it, and only the mouth that spoke a thing can unspeak it. It does not break a bond. Nothing breaks a bond. That is the whole tragedy of the thing. It buries one. The buried party loses it entirely. The other keeps all of it, and that is the price, and it is not a fair price, and I have never once said that it was. 2 winters. 27 months, and it has cost me every 7th day of my own life to hold it down." He sounded tired. "Ilva, sit up and think. Saren's people were 4 days from the border. The terms were an alliance by marriage, and nothing else was on the table, and the king had found his mate on the Thistlemere Road 11 weeks earlier, and 40,000 of my people were going to go into a 5th winter of it. What would you have had me do?" asked me. "You were 23 and in love. There is no version of that conversation in which you say yes, and there is no version in which I am wrong." And that was the worst of it. Standing in the dark on a stone floor, he was not wrong. She turned it over and over, looking for the place where it came apart, and it did not come apart, and she hated him with her whole body and could not find the flaw. "The pin on the north ridge," she said. Halvard was silent. "Say it." "The core needed to be angry," he said, "and it needed to be angry upward. A pack that blames its king does not go looking for its right keeper." Nothing moved in his face. "Bard and Auric were mine. I have carried them every day since. You may believe that or not." Ilva got up off the floor. "You put those words in my mouth," she said. "Every one of them. The neglect. The man at the top who does not know. I stood in my own shed and said your sentences, and I thought they were mine. They were true sentences. You wrote them for me, so that if I ever found out, I would hate him." Her voice had gone flat and stayed there. "You built a woman who would look straight at the wrong man for the rest of her life. I built a woman who is standing in my stores at the 3rd bell reading my accounts," Halvard said. "I have never been under any illusion about what I made. I only expected it to take longer." He picked the lamp back up. "There is still a way through this, and I will put it to you once. Sign the attestation for Midwinter as a witness of the household. 2 lines. The union is sound and no prior claim stands. You keep the core, you keep him in whatever way you have him. The treaty holds, and nobody else has to be buried at all. Sign my own name to it. You have signed it before," Halvard said. Ilva stopped breathing. 27 months ago in this building, on the night of the wedding. The rite requires the consent of one of the pair, and consent must be in a hand the law will accept. He was watching her now. "I had 15 years of your marks on file, girl. Requisitions, postings, your indenture at 11. I could have written your name in my sleep, and no clerk alive would have questioned it. Then you forged me." "No," said Halvard. "I did not need to." he turned the lamp so the light came down on the ledger's front board, and on the folded paper tucked inside it, and on the signature at the foot of that paper, which was large and impatient and slightly crooked, and which she had seen at the bottom of a torn page in her own glove on the north ridge. "He signed it, Ilva," Halvard said. "He asked me how much it would cost him, and I told him the truth, and he thought about it for 1 hour and 11 minutes, and then he signed. He gave you up for the peace with his own hand." He set the lamp down again, gently, and then the right took the hour, and the paper, and you. "That is why he cannot be told. There is nothing in him to tell." She did not sleep, and she did not go to him. And by the gray end of the morning, she had stopped shaking and started counting, which is a thing Halvard himself had taught her to do. He came to her at midday in the long gallery, and he was gentle, and he had brought her the rest of the trap. "You will want to know how long he has known," he said. "He does not know, he has known since the reaffirming." Halvard folded his hands. "He came out of that shed and sent a runner for your name inside the half-hour, Ilva. Think the writ on the ridge, the reports with his notes in the margin, the girl from the kennels brought up over the east arch. He is a very well-managed man, you told him so yourself, and a well-managed man does not go up a rotten ridge in a thaw, unless somebody has explained to him what he stands to lose. He asked me for the whole of it in the spring, and he has been keeping you close and quiet ever since, exactly as I would have advised him to, and the resin," Ilva said. "His instruction, increase it before midwinter, so that nothing wakes up in front of Siren." There it was. She kept her face doing what he expected it to do, which was crumpling. And inside the cold flat room where she worked, 3 marks became 1 animal. Because she had knelt on those flags 9 days ago with her hand flat on his chest, and for 11 seconds his heart had done a thing she had not described to anybody. And no man on this earth doses himself to the edge of that in order to look calm in front of an envoy. And because she had watched the recognition arrive in a kennel shed and close over him like water, and whatever else the right keeper of Vardal was, he had not been in that room. He was lying, which meant he was frightened, which meant midwinter. "What do you want me to do?" she said. Halvard's eyes came up, and she saw him decide that she was his. "Stand up at the renewal," he said, "before he is asked anything, and tell the Thornwild what was done to you. All of it, the right, the paper, his hand at the bottom of it." He said it kindly. "It cannot come from me, girl. I am the right keeper, and they will say I am reaching for the regency. It has to come from the woman it was done to. Nobody in that hall will doubt a single word out of your mouth. And they will be right not to, because every word of it is true. And the treaty was bought with your life," Halvard said. "You are allowed to ask for it back." Midwinter came in white and windless. They filled the right hall to the walls. Siren sat at the right hand of the floor with a dozen witnesses of her own. Solene stood in silver with her chin level. Arik stood in the middle of it all and did not once look for Ilva, which told her everything about what he had been told she was going to do. Halvard took his place between the 2 new braziers and put his hands inside his sleeves. "Before the right keeper attests," he said, "the household begs leave to hear a witness." Every face in the hall came round. Ilva walked out onto the floor. She had her corps coat on, not the Luna's gray. She had thought about that for a long time. "My name is Ilva of Thistlemere," she said. "I am a tracker. I am the Alpha King's mate, and a rite was worked on him 27 months ago to bury it, and there is a paper in this building with a signature on it." The hall came off its hinges. Siren was on her feet. Somewhere behind her a Thornwild voice said the word war out loud, and Halvard's face was doing something Ilva had waited her whole life to see on it, which was satisfaction. "The signature is not the king's," Ilva said. The noise stopped. "It is his hand," she said. "But it is not his consent, because the man who took the consent also took the memory of giving it. And a man cannot be held to a bargain that has been surgically removed from him. That is not law. That is theft with a candle." She turned to Siren. "Envoy, The fraud in this hall is not the crowns. Send your people to the right hall stores. Second, shelf, tallow cloth, and the account book. Beside it, 27 months of entries in the right keeper's own hand, with the quantities and the dates and the initial of the man he has been deucing every 7th day in this room. She did not stop, and when you have that, send them to the North Ridge, where an anchor pin was straightened with a hammer so that 2 of my trackers would fall, and my corps would blame the king for it. And ask him about the cornice above the shelf, and the girth strap, and the brazier at the rehearsal 9 days ago that stopped the Alpha King's heart for 11 seconds while I held him on the floor of that corridor. This is a woman in love, said Halvard, and she is not well. I signed the attestation on my wedding night, said Celine of Vardal, at 19, because you told me 4 times that it was a formality. I will swear to that in front of anybody in this hall. She came down the steps, searched the stores. Saren of the Thornwold looked at Halvard for a long moment. It cost you an afternoon and some candles, she said. And the right keeper of Vardal came apart. He went for the brazier, not for her, which she had not expected and should have, because he was still trying to finish the work with 200 people watching. He got a hand on it. She got him at the wrist, and she went in low, the way you go into a dog fight in a doorway, and used the whole weight of him against the turn of his own arm, and put him face down on the flags, with her knee between his shoulders, and the brazier ringing away across the floor unspilled. She put her mouth close to his ear. You taught me to read what a man leaves behind, Ylva said. You should have been more careful what you left. Then the guards had him, and it was over, and it took a very long time to be over, and when the hall finally emptied, there was only Oryx standing in the middle of the floor with his hands open at his sides. You saved my life, he said. Again, after I came to stop him, Ylva said. That is all it was, Ylva. His voice cracked straight down the middle. I signed it. I do not remember signing it, and that is somehow worse. And I have been standing here for an hour trying to find the sentence, and there is not one. I gave you away. He took 1 step. I love you. I know that I do. I have known since the ford, they tell me, and I cannot get to it, and I am asking you anyway. They tell you, Ylva said. He stopped. That is what you have. You are asking me to be loved by a man who is taking somebody else's word for it. She was crying and she did not bother about it. I have carried the whole of us on my own for 27 months, and I am not doing it a second time while you stand there holding a piece of paper that says I mattered. Come and find me when you remember me. She walked out through the smoke. They gave her the corps that spring. Master of trackers of the Greniclands, which had never been a woman before, and never anybody out of Thistlemere at all. And Devra got quietly drunk, and Fen cried, and Ylva stood in the shed she had lived in for 11 years and understood that she was very good at this and that it would not be enough. The Thornwild Treaty was rewritten by Midsummer, with Solene as its architect, and it was a better one, and Siren said so in writing. Halvard the Right Keeper sat in a stone room under the old fort and refused, every single day, to unspeak the right. It was the last thing he had, and he kept it. So Orek did not remember her. And he courted her anyway, for 8 months, on nothing but evidence. He had the 2 names cut into the gate stone, where the whole fortress had to walk past them, Bard and Ulrich. And Ulrich's widow pensioned out of his own household purse, and he never once mentioned either thing to her. He put her on the chamber. Twice a week she watched him listen to men who had spent 2 winters managing him, and he had stopped being manageable, and it was terrible and glorious to watch. He wrote 1 letter a week, on the 7th day, which she noticed and never said anything about. He did not write about love. He wrote about the drainage in the lower town, and whether a tracker's pension should follow the widow or the household, and he asked her opinion, as though it were still worth something, and at the bottom of one of them, in the small hand he used when he was tired, he had written, I have no memory of you and I have a great deal of evidence. And I find I would rather be a man who is persuaded than a man who was lucky. Devra counted them. Devra counted everything. 31, she said in the 9th month. I did not ask. You did not have to. You have gone gray in the face, Captain, and the whole shed has to stand here and look at it. Then the letter stopped. The last one was 4 lines. He had understood at last that he was asking her to accept something he could not bring her. He would not ask again. He hoped she would let him keep the chamber days, because he had come to depend on somebody in that room telling him the truth. She read it twice. It was what she had asked for, in the exact words she had asked for it in, and it landed on her like the mountain. 11 days later, Fen came up the east stair, gray to the lips. He is gone. No horse, no coin drawn. His sword on its stand and his coat on the hook, and the trackers had his scent to the west postern, where it stopped the way a scent stops when a man means it to. Ylva stood in the yard with the frost coming up through her boots, and did not need a hound. She knew where the road went. She had given him the wrong one on it once. She went out through the postern at a run and down the west road in the dark for 12 miles, and the sun came up over Thistlemere, the way it had come up over Thistlemere her whole childhood, gray and mean and late, and she found the Alpha King of Vardal sitting in the mud of the ford with the water going over his legs. He had been there some hours. Blue about the mouth, blood dried under his nose and on his collar, hands shaking so hard he had them jammed under his arms, and he was still trying, sitting in freezing water, hammering on a door in himself with his bare knuckles. "You absolute fool," she said, and went in after him. "It can be broken from the inside." His teeth were going. "Halvard will not speak it. So it has to be from the inside, and it is survivable. It is written down as survivable. It is only that not many. Get up. I could not ask you again." He would not be got up. He had her sleeve. "You said come and find you when I remember. So, I came to the last place I have any evidence of, and I have been sitting in it since the 10th bell. And Ylva, there is nothing here. There is a ford and a stone. And I know what happened in it because you told me, and that is the whole of my life now, being told. You are going to die in a river to win an argument." "Yes," said Oric. "You are the one who is frightened." She stopped, with both hands full of his coat. "You have made me do all of it," he said. His head had gone down against her shoulder, and the words came up out of her collar, slurred with cold and entirely undefended. 8 months. The letters, the gate, stone, the chamber. And you sit there and you let me remember for both of us. And you never once have to stand up and be chosen, because if you never ask, it can never be taken out of you again. He was shivering so hard, it came through her. "I gave you up once. I know. I have to live in that room, but you have been living in it too, and you got there on your own." Ylva knelt in the ford, with the water going over her knees. "Say something," he said. "Please, anything. Say anything again." And she heard it in his voice, from the far side of 2 winters. A kennel shed with the snow gone, to water on his shoulders. "Say anything again." "There is nothing else I am," Ylva said. "That was the list. You told me on the ridge that somebody else wrote it, and you were right. And I have not managed to put a new one together, and I have been standing on the bank for 8 months waiting for you to hand me one." She got his face in both hands and turned it up out of her collar. "I am not standing there anymore. Look at me." He looked at her. It came up through him the way water comes up. She watched it happen the way she had watched it close, only backward, and slower, and with the whole cost of it going across his face one thing at a time. "You gave me the wrong road," Auric said. Ylva made a sound she was not proud of. "You gave me the wrong road, and then you came after me an hour later, because you felt guilty about it, and you would not admit that was why, and you said you were checking the ford for the core." His hands had come up out of his armpits and got hold of her. "It was not the core, Ylva. It was never the core. What is my name?" she said. "Ylva," and nothing closed. She knelt in 6 inches of freezing water, with the sun coming up over the worst village in the Greenock lands, and felt the whole of it come back down the thread from the other side. 27 months of it arriving at once, and it was not gentle, and she did not care. "Marry me," she said. "I am married. You are annulled since the equinox. You signed it yourself. You complained to me about the drafting." She was laughing, which she had not planned. "Auric, marry me. I am asking, and I want it on the record that I asked, and I am not asking twice. You will have to," he said, "because I am about to pass out in this ford, and I would like to be awake for it. Then say yes now, and I will say it again when you can hold a pen." "Yes," said the Alpha King of Vardal, into her shoulder, and went out cold in the water, with his hands still shut in her coat. He asked her again 11 times over the next fortnight, having established that she had not, in fact, meant the part about only asking once. They were married in the wet month, 4 winters and a season from the ford, and the whole lower town came out for it, and Dever counted the flowers and refused to say the number out loud. Fen wept from the second line and blamed the pollen. Saline of Vardal stood up as witness for both of them, and then rode south a month later as the Greenock envoy to the Thornwild, where she was extremely good and extremely happy and did not write nearly often enough. Halvard died in his stone room in the 2nd year and never spoke the right. Ylva went down once, near the end. She did not tell anybody what was said, and Auric did not ask, and that was one of the many reasons she had married him. The gate stone kept its 2 names. She walked past them every morning of her life. "You looked at me once in a kennel shed," Auric said, on the night of it, "and the entire arrangement of my life came apart on the floor. You had it coming. I had it coming." He turned her hand over in his. "No, putting it back. Nobody is putting anything back," said Ylva of Thistlemere, master of trackers who had given the wrong road to a king and then gone after him anyway. "We are out of candles."